The bells rang early that morning, sharp and sudden, waking the capital with a jolt. King Robert Baratheon was dead, not from a bore, not from drunken folly or carelessness. No, the whispers began before the body had even turned cold. Some said it was a fever, others claimed it was his heart, too full of wine and rage. But behind closed doors, behind silk curtains and gold-plated lies, a darker truth brewed. Cersei Lannister had poisoned him, and she had done it carefully. Precisely, sweet wine laced with the strangest of poisons. So subtle the Grand Maester couldn't tell what it was. A drop each night, a slow descent. By the time Robert's guards found him gasping for breath in his chambers, there was nothing to be done. He died as he lived, alone, bloated and drunk. Cersei sat beside his bed as he died, face blank, eyes dry. "You never loved me," she whispered. "You never saw me. Not once." She rose before his last breath left him. There was no need to stay. There were other things to be done now. The future was being written, and she wasn't going to miss it. Before the Raven flew to Winterfell, before Ned Stark could even mount his horse, Cersei sealed the capital like a vault. She called her father to the city, called Jaime to her side, and placed Joffrey on the Iron Throne before anyone could question a thing. Ned Stark, still loyal and blind, arrived a week later, surprised to find black banners already hanging in the Red Keep. He wasn't even off his horse before a Lannister knight informed him, "King Robert is dead. His Grace King Joffrey awaits you." Ned felt the weight of it immediately. No warning, no will, no voice in the transition. Something was wrong, but it was too late. He was already surrounded. Cersei met him in the throne room, dressed in gold, mourning black, nowhere in sight. "Lord Stark," she said smoothly, "welcome to the capital. I trust your journey was uneventful." He bowed stiffly. "I'm sorry for your loss." She gave a thin smile. "Don't be. The realm is in good hands now." The boy sat on the throne already, Joffrey, smug and pale, his crown slightly too big. He didn't speak, only sneered at Ned with empty eyes. It felt wrong, all of it. Ned's instincts screamed at him, but he swallowed them down. "His Grace is young. He will need guidance." Cersei stepped closer. "And that is why you're here, isn't it? To serve as hand, just as Robert wished." But Robert hadn't wished it. Not like this. Something in Cersei's eyes told Ned the truth. She knew. She had planned it all. That night, Ned sent word to Stannis, knowing full well what he'd discovered years ago. Joffrey was no son of Robert Baratheon. He was Jaime's. The children all were. But this time, Cersei was ready. She intercepted the Raven. Every word, every name, every secret, and she did what she had always done best. She struck first, the next morning. Ned woke to the sound of swords outside his door. He barely had time to grab his blade before Sir Meryn Trant entered, flanked by gold cloaks. "By order of the Queen Regent, you are under arrest for treason." Ned narrowed his eyes. "Treason? I serve the realm." "No," Meryn said. "You serve a dead king." Within the hour, Ned was in the black cells. And Cersei Lannister stood tall in the small council, her father now seated beside her. Tywin's cold smirk, a perfect mirror of her own. There would be no slow descent this time, no weeks of political games. The game had already been won, and Cersei wasn't playing anymore. The black cells beneath the Red Keep were colder than the North ever was. Ned Stark sat chained, back against damp stone, listening to the rats scurry behind the walls. Days passed, maybe weeks. Time slipped away down here, swallowed by darkness. No trial came, no messengers, no allies. He was alone. The last time he saw daylight, it was from the steps of the throne room, dragged in front of the court like a criminal, flanked by gold cloaks who answered not to law, but to Lannister gold. Joffrey had sat smugly on the Iron Throne, legs swinging like a boy on a stool, and declared him a traitor. No one spoke up. Not Renly, who had vanished the night Robert died. Not Littlefinger, who only gave Ned a look that said, "I warned you." Not even Pycelle, who coughed and nodded along to every lie Cersei spilled like wine. Only Varys had dared approach him once. Whispering in the dark, the Queen moved quickly. Too quickly. "You underestimated her, Lord Stark." Ned had said nothing. He didn't need to. He had underestimated her. He thought her a schemer, a manipulator, a liar. But he hadn't understood the truth until it was too late. Cersei Lannister was a killer. Back in the light of the court, Cersei had declared him guilty of treason, fabricating a tale of how he tried to usurp Joffrey's birthright, claiming that Ned forged a false will to place Stannis on the throne. There was no proof, of course, but in the capital, proof didn't matter. Power did, and now that power sat on a throne of swords and wore golden curls. Joffrey, the boy, was worse than his mother, arrogant, cruel, insecure, the kind of ruler who would kill not just to maintain power, but for amusement. And Cersei, proud lioness that she was, had handed him the kingdom like it was a gift. Meanwhile, in Winterfell, Ned's children were still stranded. Arya had gone missing the night of his arrest. No one could find her. Sansa, oh God, Sansa! They paraded her through court like a doll in a dress, calling her the future queen, promised now to Joffrey. She stood beside Cersei like a lamb, her blue eyes full of confusion and terror. And still Ned was forced to watch. He thought of Robb far in the north. Would his eldest son raise an army? Would he come to save him? Or would he come to avenge him? Elsewhere in the Tower of the Hand, Cersei sat in Robert's old seat, swirling wine in her cup. Her father sat beside her silent, his cold expression unchanged since his arrival. "You move faster than I expected," he finally said. Cersei smirked. "You raised me to be a lion, father." "Lions don't wait," he didn't return her smile. "What's your plan for Stark?" "Let him rot. His name means nothing in the south. And in the north? His son is just a boy." Tywin nodded, but there was caution in his eyes. "Boys become wolves when they're cornered." "I'm not cornered," Cersei said sharply. "I hold the capital. I hold the throne. And now I hold the North's lord in chains." She raised her cup. "To peace," but Tywin didn't drink. "You should have waited. Poison leaves a trail." Cersei's smile vanished for just a moment. "No one will find it. The Grand Maester wrote his death off as heart failure. He was a king, a loud one, a dangerous one. But he was still a Baratheon. There will be questions." "Let them ask," she hissed. "Robert is gone. Joffrey sits on the throne. The truth no longer matters." Her father studied her in silence. There was pride in his gaze, but also something colder, something calculating. "You've won, Cersei. But never forget, when you win with poison, people start wondering if their wine's next." Meanwhile, deep in the black cells, Varys returned to Ned's door. He knelt beside the bars. "Quiet and urgent. They're not going to kill you," he whispered. Ned raised his head. "Then what do they want?" "They want you to break," Varys said. "To kneel. To say Joffrey is the rightful king. To die slowly, not with a sword, but with a whisper." Ned stared through the bars. "She murdered a king. She sits beside a bastard child and dares to call it justice." "Yes," Varys agreed softly. "And unless something changes, she may go on doing so for a very long time." Outside the walls of King's Landing, a rider galloped north, bearing a sealed message, and in Winterfell, a direwolf lifted its head and howled to the cold sky. The wind in Winterfell carried more than snow. It carried tension. Robb Stark stood on the ramparts, reading the letter over and over again, his breath fogging in the cold air. He was young but not stupid. He knew what a carefully written lie looked like. The Raven had arrived 3 days after the news of King Robert's death. It was written in Cersei Lannister's hand, sealed with the royal sigil, and it said everything in perfect, polite language: that Lord Eddard Stark was arrested for treason, that he plotted to overthrow King Joffrey's rightful claim to the throne, that he conspired with Stannis Baratheon to incite rebellion, and that, for the sake of peace, the new king had shown mercy and spared his life. For now, Robb crushed the letter in his fist. He turned to Theon Greyjoy, standing nearby. "She's lying," Theon nodded. "Of course she's lying. That Lannister witch poisoned her husband, and now wants your father's head to seal her crown." Maester Luwin stepped cautiously between them. "We must be careful. Marching south would provoke a war." "There already is a war," Robb snapped. "They just haven't had the decency to declare it." Catelyn Stark stood silently by the fire in the great hall that night, her face pale with rage. They're keeping him alive because they want something from him, a confession, a bargain, or to use him as bait. Robb looked at his mother. Then we'll go get him. Catelyn turned. With what army? Robb stared into the fire. We'll raise it. He summoned his bannermen. Horns sounded across the north. From Bear Island to the Dreadfort, Stark banners unfurled. Grey direwolves howled in the wind. They came by the hundreds, Mormonts, Karstarks, Umbers. Young men, old warriors, lords and commoners, the North remembered, and the North was angry. Lords and commoners, the North remembered, and the North was angry. Back in King's Landing, Sansa Stark stood like a ghost in the court, her face pale, her voice timid, her hands always clenched at her sides. She repeated the same line to anyone who asked, "My father is loyal. He would never betray the king." But no one believed her. Cersei kept her close, always within reach. She dressed her in the finest silks, smiled for the court, and whispered poison into her ear like a mother. Men who speak of honor often die with it, she said one evening, brushing Sansa's hair. But clever girls live to see their children rule. Sansa said nothing. She hadn't cried in days. Something inside her had hardened. She didn't want to be queen anymore. She wanted to go home, and if that meant playing the game, then she would learn the rules. Ned, meanwhile, was losing pieces of himself in the dark. The chains on his wrists had rubbed his skin raw. His beard had grown thick and dirty. His mind wandered. He thought of Catelyn's hair, the laughter of his children. He even thought of Robert, of the friend who became a king, who became a stranger. He didn't speak when Varys visited anymore. What was there to say? Until one day the eunuch said something different. "They're marching," he whispered. Ned blinked. "Who?" "Your son." "The North." A spark of life stirred in him. "Robb?" Varys nodded. "He's young, but they're following him. They've passed Moat Cailin. They're coming fast." Ned tried to stand but fell back, his body too weak. "Foolish boy," he whispered. "He'll get himself killed," or Varys said. "He'll bring the whole realm crashing down on Cersei's pretty little kingdom of lies." Cersei sat in her solar drinking wine, listening to the reports. "They say the young wolf marches with 20,000 men," Qyburn said. She didn't flinch. And he moves fast." She sipped her wine. "Let him come. We have the gold. We have the city. We have the throne." But Tywin Lannister, seated nearby, was less amused. He stared into the candlelight. "You should have killed Eddard Stark the moment you had him," Cersei smiled. "And give the North a martyr?" "No, I'll let him rot until his son's army is knocking on the gates." Tywin's voice was flat. "By then it may be too late." She stood. "The game is mine, father. Don't forget who put Joffrey on the throne. And don't forget who will die if it slips out from under him," Tywin said coldly. "Starting with you." On the road south, Robb Stark rode at the front of his army, grey winds snarling at his side. The rivers lay ahead, River Run, the twins. And then, the Red Keep. He didn't ride for glory. He didn't ride for power. He rode for his father's freedom. And if the Lannisters stood in the way, then the lion would bleed, the riverlands burned. Smoke curled into the sky from farmhouses, villages and fields. Lannister soldiers, under Sir Gregor Clegane, had begun a brutal campaign meant to send a message: stay loyal to the crown or face fire and steel. But all it did was fan the flames of rebellion. At River Run, Robb Stark stood over the map table with Catelyn by his side, both faces tense. Eyes focused on the line of Lannister banners pressing east from the Golden Tooth. Lord Blackfish paced nearby, muttering about supply lines and flanking positions, while the bannermen stood quiet, waiting for Robb's word. "The Lannisters are baiting us," Robb said, jaw clenched. "They want me to break formation and rush Tywin. They'll expect you to ride for King's Landing," Rose Bolton murmured. "It would be unwise to give them what they expect." "I don't want King's Landing," Robb replied. "Not yet. I want my father." Silence fell over the war tent. "He's still alive," Robb continued. "If he were dead, they'd have announced it to every corner of Westeros by now. No, Cersei's keeping him as a shield. Or a trophy. Either way, she doesn't want him freed. So we take someone she does want." Catelyn's eyes sharpened. "You mean Jaime?" Robb nodded. The plan was simple, brutal, and risky. Strike the Western Lannister forces hard. Take Jaime Lannister and use him to force Cersei's hand. It would mean risking thousands of northern lives. But Robb knew now. Honor alone wouldn't win this war. That night, as the men readied for battle, Catelyn found her son staring into the fire. His face had aged in just weeks. The boy she knew was fading, and in his place stood something harder. "You remind me of your father," she said. Robb didn't look up. "Then why can't I save him?" "Because this realm was built on treachery and lies," she whispered. "And your father tried to live in it with truth." He turned to her. "That's not how I'm going to win, is it?" "No," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "But it's how you'll survive yourself." In King's Landing, Cersei sat in her solar, her fingers twisting the stem of a wine goblet. Joffrey had grown restless. He paraded around the throne room like a child, pretending to be a god, issuing punishments for invented slights, threatening lords, and smirking when Sansa cried, "You must control him," Tywin said from across the table. Cersei snapped, "He is the king. He is a boy with a crown. And a boy who thinks himself untouchable will die just as easily as a peasant." Cersei turned away, but her silence was agreement. She was beginning to see the cracks in her perfect image of power. Robert had been a brute, but Joffrey was something worse. Petty, reckless, and most dangerously unpredictable. Then word came. The Whispering Wood. The young wolf had taken Jaime Lannister prisoner. The news arrived like a blade to the chest. Cersei stood frozen, the wine goblet slipping from her fingers and shattering on the floor. For a moment she said nothing. Then she screamed, "No, no, no!" Tywin closed his eyes. "He's cleverer than I gave him credit for." Cersei turned on him. "We need to get him back." Tywin's voice was ice. "We've lost our best commander, our leverage. And now your position in King's Landing is weaker than ever." She stormed from the room. Her mask of control had cracked, and she knew it. In the black cells, Ned Stark was dragged to his feet by gold cloaks. They pulled him through twisting corridors until he was thrown into a small room lit by torches. Cersei stood at the other end, alone, her eyes wild with fury. "Your son took my brother," she hissed. Ned met her gaze, weak but still unbroken. "Then perhaps you'll understand how it feels." She stepped closer, her voice a whisper of venom. "You will confess. You will kneel, and you will beg Joffrey's mercy. Or I will have your daughter's pretty head on a spike beside yours." Ned didn't flinch. "If I die with honor, so be it. But you, if you start killing children, you'll lose more than your crown. You'll lose the realm." Cersei stared at him, breathing hard. "You think honor matters here?" "No," Ned said. "But fear only lasts so long, and you're running out of time." In the north, Robb stood outside Jaime's cell. The Kingslayer was bruised, bloodied, and chained. "You've lost," Jaime spat. "My sister will never trade me for that old fool." Robb didn't smile. "She will, because I'm not asking." He turned and walked away. Behind him, Jaime laughed. But there was no humor in it. Just the sound of a lion realizing the cage was real. The great hall of King's Landing was silent. Eerily so. Joffrey Baratheon sat slouched on the iron throne, legs crossed, crown slipping over one eye. His voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "So, he wants a trade." Cersei stood beside him, stiff as a statue, face unreadable. "He has Jaime," she said slowly. "He's offering a full withdrawal of his northern forces in exchange for your uncle's release. And your mercy, my mercy." Joffrey laughed. "You mean he wants me to let the traitor live?" "He wants his father," she said, voice sharp. Joffrey scoffed. "He's lucky I don't send his head back in a box." From the corner of the room, Grandmaster Pycelle cleared his throat. "Your Grace, such a gesture might—" "Silence," Joffrey snapped. "You all act like this Stark boy has power. He's a child playing at war." Varys stepped forward quietly. "And yet that child has broken your armies at Whispering Wood, taken your uncle prisoner, and now holds the Riverlands in his grip." "Enough," Joffrey shouted, slamming his hand on the throne's arm. "Let the wolves howl. Let them come. I'll feed them to the dogs." Cersei stepped in front of him, lowering her voice, but her words were laced with steel. If you deny this exchange, Robb Stark will not retreat. He will not forgive. He will march straight for King's Landing with 20,000 men, and we will have no one left to command our armies. Then kill Eddard Stark, Joffrey hissed. Send the message, Cersei paled. No, not yet, but Joffrey was already rising, his voice echoing through the throne room. Bring the traitor to the Sept. Let all the city see what happens to men who defy the crown. Tywin arrived at the Red Keep just as the order was being carried out. He stormed through the halls like a storm given legs, cloak billowing behind him, demanding answers. You let him give the order. He snarled at Cersei. He's the king, she hissed back. He's a boy, Tywin growled. And you're his mother. That means you hold the leash. Cersei turned away. I tried. No, he said coldly. You failed. The crowd outside the great sept of Baelor roared with tension. Commoners packed into every corner of the square, eager for blood. They didn't care about politics. They wanted a spectacle. Eddard Stark was dragged onto the platform in chains, gaunt and pale but unbowed. Sansa screamed for him from the steps, held back by Cersei's handmaidens. Joffrey stood atop the balcony, smug, golden and ready to play God. Confess, he called out. Ned looked up, locking eyes with his daughter. Then slowly, painfully, he turned toward the crowd and spoke. I am Eddard Stark, he said. And I committed treason, gasps echoed. Sansa wept. I conspired with Stannis Baratheon to steal the throne from King Joffrey. He paused. His voice cracked not from fear but shame. I acted out of pride. And for that I ask mercy. Not for myself, but for my daughters. The crowd cheered. Joffrey smirked, pleased. Cersei stepped forward and whispered something urgently in the king's ear. Everyone could see it. Even Pycelle, even Varys, even the guards. She was trying to stop him. But Joffrey's eyes gleamed with something colder than madness, entitlement. Sir Ilyn, he called out, loud and clear. Bring me his head. Everything stopped. Cersei's eyes widened. No! Sansa screamed. Even the gold cloaks hesitated, but Ilyn Payne stepped forward, sword in hand, and the world shattered in River Run. Robb Stark was training with Grey Wind when the Raven came. Catelyn read the letter. Hands shaking. She didn't speak. She just handed it to her son. Robb read it once. Then again. Then dropped it in the mud. His voice was low. Flat. They killed him. The camp went silent. For a moment, no one moved. Then Robb turned to his bannermen. We ride south. We take back my sisters. And we tear the Lannisters apart, the men roared. Even Rose Bolton nodded grimly. It will be a long war. No, Robb said. It will be a reckoning. Catelyn touched his shoulder gently. What will you do with Jaime? Robb turned his gaze toward the cell. Use him. In the dungeons. Jaime Lannister sat chained, grinning to himself in the dark. When the door creaked open, he looked up lazily. Robb entered, no longer a boy. I assume you've heard the news, Robb said coldly. Jaime tilted his head. You mean your father's head being taken off by a child king while your sister screamed? Yes, I heard. Robb didn't flinch. I hope you're comfortable, Kingslayer, because you're going to be in that cell for a long time. Jaime smirked. Unless you hang me. Robb stepped closer. Oh no, I'll keep you alive. Jaime's grin faded. Because when I send your head back to King's Landing, I want your sister to know exactly who took it. King's Landing was no longer a court. It was a cage. The streets had turned restless since Ned Stark's execution. There had been cheers that day, yes. But days later, the silence settled. The rumors spread. Whispers in alleys, murmurs behind closed doors. He was innocent. The Queen forced his confession. The boy king is mad. Stark blood doesn't fall without consequences. Cersei Lannister could feel it in the air like smoke. The weight of it pressed on her shoulders as she sat in her chambers, staring at the fire, wine untouched. She had won, yes. Ned Stark was dead, and Joffrey sat the throne. But it hadn't brought peace, only pressure. Her chambers felt colder even in the height of summer. Her enemies were growing. The North had declared Robb Stark king in the North. The Riverlands were bleeding red with rebellion. Stannis Baratheon had raised his banner from Dragonstone. Renly had vanished, but word said he gathered men in the Reach. Even Dawn had gone silent. Their mourning for Elia Martell turning into plotting. And here, in the capital, the people had turned hungry and angry, two things that made them dangerous. Joffrey didn't care. He swaggered through the Red Keep like a lion cub pretending to roar, unaware of the wolves, dragons, and knives creeping closer every day. Cersei watched him from behind the throne sometimes, her hand twitching toward the crown on his head, not to take it, but to strangle the stupidity out of him. He had ruined everything with that one order: bring me his head. The plan had been control, leverage, bargain, not martyrdom. Now, all the realm had seen was a noble man executed in the square for doing the right thing. It didn't make her son look strong. It made him look terrifying. In the north, Robb Stark stood before his lords at River Run, cloak soaked from rain, eyes shadowed with war. The Lannisters have declared themselves above justice, he said, voice cutting through the storm outside. They kill lords like beggars. They lie, they scheme, and they slaughter our kin in cold blood. The fire crackled as Lord Karstark stepped forward. They've broken every vow of honor in the realm. The boy on the throne is not a king, said Great Shanamba. He's a butcher's son with a crown. The room erupted in voices of agreement. Then silence fell as Robb stepped forward, hands clenched at his sides. We will not serve the Iron Throne while it is ruled by liars and kinslayers. He turned to the assembled men, his voice calm but heavy. I call for the North to break from the Seven Kingdoms. Gasps followed. Catelyn's breath caught. But one by one, they knelt and the hall shook with a new cry. The king in the North. Robb Stark, no longer a boy, stood tall among the wolves of the North. But war was not about banners or titles. It was about blood. In his cell, Jaime Lannister sat with his wrists bound and his pride torn to pieces. The rumors had reached him, even through stone walls and iron bars. Robb Stark crowned. Tywin retreating. The Riverlands lost. It wasn't fear he felt, it was rage. They had underestimated the boy. The wolves had drawn blood. And the cub they all mocked was now king of a kingdom no one had seen in 100 years. Jaime heard the cell door creak and looked up. Catelyn Stark entered, flanked by guards. He raised an eyebrow. Lovely to see you, Lady Stark. Did you come to admire the view? She didn't smile. She walked straight up to him and slapped him across the face, hard. Jaime blinked, stunned. That was for Bran, another slap. And that was for Ned. He chuckled, tasting blood. At this rate, you'll have a full set for every Stark. She leaned down, eyes cold and bright. You will answer for what you've done. I always do, he muttered, but Catelyn's face twisted, something deeper than anger there. No, you'll answer not with words, but with your life, or your usefulness. Jaime tilted his head. Ah, you want to trade. For my daughters, she said. Sansa is still their prisoner. And if Arya lives, I'll get her back too. Jaime smiled again. And here I thought honor died with your husband. Catelyn didn't rise to the bait. We'll let you live, Kingslayer, she said. But you'll ride in chains, from one end of this war to the other. Jaime's smile faded. He knew then he wasn't being kept alive for mercy. He was being paraded for war. Meanwhile, on Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon stood before a fiery god he barely believed in, listening to a red woman speak of kings made of shadows and false princes crowned in gold. The usurper's sons are bastards, Melisandre whispered. Joffrey is no king. I know, Stannis said, his voice like cold steel. I always knew, and yet you did nothing. Not yet, he replied. She smiled, her red eyes gleaming. Then it is time, my king. Let us burn the lies away. And far in the east, a dragon stirred in the night. Fire was coming, and the game Cersei thought she had won was just beginning. Was just beginning. War had become the rhythm of the realm. North, south, riverlands, stormlands. Everywhere banners were raised, blood was spilled, and kings were crowned. The death of Eddard Stark, once meant to solidify Lannister, rule had instead shattered the seven kingdoms into pieces, and Cersei Lannister was losing her grip on all of them. The small council was smaller than ever. Renly was gone, riding in the Reach. calling himself king. Stannis had declared war, backed by a foreign religion and a growing fleet. Robb Stark held the Riverlands with northern steel. Even Dawn had begun to stir, quietly closing its gates, sending no support, answering no ravens. Cersei sat at the head of the council table, Joffrey beside her, chewing on a bit of fruit like a bored child. Pycelle mumbled nonsense about grain. Varys offered nothing but his usual riddles. Littlefinger, curiously absent more often than not, had begun to vanish into the cracks. Only Tyrion brought fire to the room. "Every raven carries worse news than the last," he said, slamming his goblet on the table. "The Riverlords back Robb, the Storm Lords back Stannis. And now Renly plays king in Highgarden." Cersei rolled her eyes. "And you'd suggest what? We beg forgiveness?" "I'd suggest we stop pretending this is still a game," Tyrion snapped. "We are at war, not just with armies but with the people. You heard the crowds. They whisper of the Butcher Boy King. They don't fear us. They hate us," Joffrey sneered. "Let them hate me. I'll put their heads on spikes." Tyrion's eyes narrowed. "That's the problem. You already did." In the Red Keep's highest tower, Sansa Stark stood alone, staring out the window toward the river, wondering if Arya was still alive, wondering if her mother would ever come, wondering if Robb had forgotten her. But he hadn't. A letter arrived that night, hidden in a cake meant for the Queen. It was passed through whispers, fingers, cloaks, until it reached her trembling hands. She unfolded it in the candlelight. "I am coming for you." "Hold on." Robb, her knees nearly gave out. She read it again, and for the first time in weeks. She smiled. Robb Stark moved like a storm across the Riverlands, with the Blackfish at his side, and Rose Bolton's cruelty sharpening his rear guard. He had taken back every Lannister-held town east of the Trident. Jaime remained a prisoner in chains, paraded before every captured holdfast, a symbol of southern pride, broken and bowed. And yet Robb wasn't proud. He was tired. With every victory the war deepened. His bannermen wanted vengeance, not strategy. Lords like Karstark and Umber grew restless. They wanted to march on King's Landing now, swords bared. But Robb knew better. "We don't take the throne by marching into traps," he said one night. "We take it by bleeding them dry, piece by piece." Catelyn watched him carefully. "He'll try something. Cersei always does." "She already has," Robb said. He tossed a scroll onto the table. It was a message from the twins. Walder Frey demanded a marriage. Catelyn sighed. "Of course he does. They want me to marry one of his daughters. In exchange, he'll give us the crossing and men." Robb looked at the map. "Without the twins, we're stuck. If we try the long route, we lose momentum." Catelyn touched his shoulder. "Your heart may not want it, but your people need it." Robb closed his eyes. "I'll do it." And in that moment, another piece of the boy inside him died. In King's Landing, Cersei began plotting her next move. She had lost the north. She had lost Jaime, her enemies multiplied by the week, but she still had one thing no one else had, the capital. She summoned the alchemists. The old men came trembling, muttering of wildfire, casks buried deep beneath the city, remnants of Aerys madness. "I want every cache accounted for," Cersei said. "And I want more." One of the pyromancers swallowed hard. "Your Grace." "Wildfire is unstable. It could consume the city." She smiled coldly. "That's the point. If she was going to lose, she'd do it on her terms. The same way she had poisoned Robert. The same way she had executed Ned. Quiet, brutal. "Final. Let them come," she said. "If they think they'll take this city without blood, they're fools." Far to the south, Stannis Baratheon knelt before a flaming heart. Melisandre stood behind him, whispering, "There is only one true king, one chosen by fire." Stannis stared into the flames. "The Lannisters killed my brother. The boy is no Baratheon. His crown is false, and your path is clear." She handed him a leech, bloodied, steaming. He threw it into the fire. She whispered, "Joffrey." The flames hissed, and somewhere in the Red Keep, the boy king felt a pain in his chest, sudden and sharp, a warning. War was closing in on every side. Cersei held the city with teeth bared. Robb marched with vengeance in his heart. Stannis sailed with fire in his wake. Renly crowned himself with flowers and gold, and across the sea, dragons began to stretch their wings in the east. The game was broken, and from the ashes, only one would rise, the Golden Widow. The city trembled beneath 1,000 feet. From the ramparts of the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister stood wrapped in black and gold, her fingers clenching the stone ledge so tightly her knuckles went white. Below her, the gates of King's Landing stood shut tight. Guards on every wall, bows strung and catapults readied. War had finally come to her door. Robb Stark had crossed the Twins. Stannis Baratheon had landed in the Stormlands. Renly was in the Reach, crowned with roses and flanked by 100 banners, and within the city the whispers of rebellion grew louder. The people were starving. The gold cloaks were restless. Even the nobles were starting to question the Queen Regent's grip. But Cersei didn't bend. She never had. In her chambers, she kept the wildfire casks marked in red ink on a secret map beneath her bed. The city was laced with it, beneath the sept, under the streets, around the gates. It wasn't just a trap. It was a promise. If I go down, I will take them all with me. Joffrey no longer listened. He mocked council meetings. He threatened to flay beggars in the streets. Even Pycelle had begun to look uncomfortable. "He's a beast," Tyrion whispered to Varys, "and beasts don't rule. They burn." Meanwhile, in the north, ravens arrived every hour. Stannis had declared his claim in fire and steel, marching toward King's Landing with a fleet at his back. Renly, eager to beat his brother to the capital, had taken Bitterbridge with the might of the Reach behind him. But all eyes were on Robb Stark. He had taken Harrenhal. He had captured 2 Lannister cousins. And now, with Walder Frey's allegiance and the twins at his back, he marched south, one kingdom at a time. At his side rode Catelyn, silent as grief. The Blackfish, stern as stone. Roose Bolton, shadowed and cold. And in a locked cage behind the lines, Jaime Lannister sat, eyes narrow, a prisoner not just of war, but of legacy. "You're making a mistake," he told Robb one night. "You think if you win you'll fix the realm. But the realm doesn't want fixing. It wants blood." Robb didn't respond. He just walked away. In the capital, the final hour came with horns. Stannis had landed at Blackwater Bay. His fleet, black sails with the red stag, blanketed the water like an omen. Panic broke through the streets. Shops shuttered. Soldiers deserted. But Cersei stood on the Iron Throne with her son beside her, one hand resting on Joffrey's shoulder. "We fight," she told the court. "We hold the city, and if we can't..." She kept that part to herself. Below, Tyrion readied the wildfire. He had taken control from the alchemists, knowing better than anyone what Cersei was capable of. He had seen the map. He knew what she planned. The Battle of Blackwater began with silence. Then the first explosion shattered the bay. Green fire consumed the water. Ships ignited, men screamed, and the sea turned into a field of flame. Stannis pressed forward anyway, through smoke and death, landing on the shores with a fury only a Baratheon could bring. Tyrion led the defense, axe in hand, face bloodied, commanding the walls as chaos reigned. Joffrey fled. Cersei did not. She took Tommen in her arms, sitting on the Iron Throne, with a vial of poison clutched in her fingers. Eyes locked on the doors. "If they take the city," she whispered, "we die as kings." But the doors never opened, because help came not from her own schemes, but from Tywin. The Lion of Casterly Rock arrived at dawn with the Tyrells at his side. Renly's death, shadowborn by Stannis' black magic, had turned the Reach against him. And Margaery, ever ambitious, had offered her hand to Joffrey in exchange for alliance. And so the battle turned. Stannis was driven back. The city was saved, but Cersei was not victorious. She had been saved, yes, but not by her cunning, not by her fire, but by others. The city cheered for Tywin, for Loras, for Margaery, not her, not the queen who had killed her husband, not the queen who had murdered Ned Stark. Not the queen who ruled through fear. Her power was crumbling, and she could feel it. In the aftermath, Joffrey announced his engagement to Margaery Tyrell. The court cheered. Tyrion was named Master of Coin. Tywin, Hand of the King, and Cersei. Cersei became a shadow of herself, surrounded by allies she did not trust, advisors she could not command, and a king she could no longer control. She drank more, smiled less, and watched her throne grow smaller every day. In the Tower of the Hand, Tyrion poured himself a drink and said aloud, "She won the war, and still lost the game." In River Run, Robb received word of Blackwater. His jaw tightened. He had lost the race, but not the war. "My sisters are still prisoners," he said. "My father still lies in an unmarked grave. And the Lannisters still rule." He looked to his mother. "This isn't over." "No," Catelyn said. "But now they're watching." Robb nodded. "Then we give them something to fear, something to fear." And across the sea, a silver-haired girl stood beside 3 dragons, watching the sunrise over Slaver's Bay. She had heard of the death of Ned Stark, of the War of 5 Kings, of wildfire in the capital. She smiled. "Let them burn each other," Daenerys Targaryen whispered. "I will take what's left."